Thank you so much for choosing to listen to Building Better Businesses with Catalyst Consulting. I'm Kristen Dees, the founder of Catalyst Consulting, a business consulting agency that is passionate about helping small businesses thrive. The goal of this podcast is to connect entrepreneurs with experts in a variety of industries that support small business owners in order to provide you with helpful tips, resources, and some entrepreneurship inspiration. Thanks for joining me on this episode. My guest today is Cyrina Talbot of the Mindset Transformation Company. I'm pretty excited to have you on.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
I forget how we connected. Was it through the Polka Dot group?
Yes.
Okay. That's right. Probably half of my guests have come through that in some way, shape, or form, because I posted, it was like, hey, I need some guests for my show. And so
that was the post that I saw.
Because I've gotten lots of different coaches and like some marketing people and stuff from there too. And I think there's a lot of good like mindset conversation, which is kind of what you're going to be talking about today. So tell us about you as a human being. Where are you from? What do you like to do? All that stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York and then lived in New Hampshire a couple of years, but moved to Wisconsin, a long time ago, like 25 years I've been here. So we actually moved, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now. So in the city, raised my kids and lived for most of that 25 years in central Wisconsin, kind of in a small community. We have just been down here 2.5 years. And I really like Milwaukee. Where are you?
I'm in Spokane, Washington, Eastern Washington State, the old, inland Northwest for those of us that are here, and then Pacific Northwest if you're outside of the area.
Else.
It's like, yes, West, mountains and trees and lakes and nature. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous there.
Yeah. What do you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, so we like to hike. We just started mountain biking last year. Well, my husband did when he was younger, but then we have a 13-year-old daughter who got into it. So we all get into it, which I really love. Like it's very much a family activity, and there's some decent trails around here, not like Washington, but they're pretty good. So we did that all last summer. Otherwise, we love to hike and kayak and just be outside, really. Camp. We have a Sprinter van that I don't know if you've seen like people live in their van.
Yeah, like a convert. Like yeah, they.
So cool. We go and camp around in that, which is fun as well.
That's cool that you found like a family activity that you guys can all do, because it's pretty challenging sometimes, even just like significant others to be like, we both like doing this thing all the time.
I feel really lucky because my husband and I have always loved that. Like that's our thing that we do together for sure. And the kids, we have 4 teenagers, so it's hit and miss. And funny though, because my oldest like moved out, and a lot of times when they were little, they would complain, and like as they get older, they're kind of coming back to it and appreciating it more and stuff like that. But we definitely dragged them places for sure. Because I'm like, you're going to appreciate this later. And I just love reading and learning like biographies and history, like kind of nerdy stuff. I just read a book on economics.
That's so funny. I talk about that with people a lot too. It's like the different, because when you say you love to read, I think most people just like, oh, you like to read the same things that I do. But I hate reading smart things. I only read, trash, or, well, it's not really trash. I just read like fiction and things. It's like
your brain to relax about, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I have a really hard time with like self-help books. Yeah. I do better with that stuff like auditorily sometimes, but biographies and stuff, that's so fun. It would kill me. There has to be some like, I have to have the drama. Like you have to get like The Tudors. I loved that show.
To be fair, if it's a good story, if it's someone just like, to me, I always picture the person talking if they're just like kind of droning on about themselves. But I love the biographies that are a story, right? And but it's definitely not like fun fiction for sure.
Yeah, good for economics. Like, oh, good for you. I wish.
Juicy conversation topic right there.
It kind of is right now. I mean,
well, that was kind of what I was.
That's actually, I'm like, I wish that I had paid more attention. Traditional learning style stuff is not, it was not easy for me. So especially if I didn't enjoy the topic.
Well, yeah. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I like it way better out of school than in school.
Sure. I like that you can just pick, like you can pick you're like, I'm going to learn more about economics. You can just like read a book about it, or, Google it, or take a class, that kind of stuff. Yeah. I hated being forced to do the stuff that I'm like, this is dumb. Now I'm like, I wish I knew more about how this all worked. Maybe the government. I skipped that somehow. But anyway, share another fun fact about you.
I had my kids at home.
Ooh, all 4?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, something unique that most people don't know about me.
Not fairly, not super common, I guess. Although it seems like some of that kind of
It's
more
way more
natural,
popular.
like it's becoming
Yeah,
more, yeah,
definitely
water
more.
birth stuff. Yeah.
And my mom had a few of us at home, so it was more normal, and I think that makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. No, it's cool. Good for you. That's tough, tough stuff. So talk a little bit more about what you do on the work side of things and how you provide support for business owners and entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I work with business owners really to help them if they are overwhelmed or stuck or, wanting to up level their business. And we work on healing the past, being able to be present and master your emotions and mindset, and then trust your intuition for the future. And have so you can have a kick-ass life. For me, it's really like I think we're all here. I really believe we're all here for a reason. And if you're not living your purpose, right? If you're not doing the thing you're supposed to do, especially we get into business, and I think then lots of stuff stops us. Lots of stuff comes up, and lots of stuff like feels like we got into this for a reason, and now we're kind of off course, or we're not where we think we want to be or where we thought we would be, and addressing that so that people can really do the thing they're here to do.
I think that a lot of us that are kind of in this sort of space, like consulting or coaching or whatever it is, we have the unique way to kind of provide that support for other people. How did you end up doing that? Like, what's your background? What did you do before you ended up doing your own thing?
Yeah, and I was going to ask, did you, if when you wanted to talk about kind of science behind stuff, just let me know. It's kind of that different take on it. So for me, it was my own, I think for a lot of coaches, a lot of business owners, we realize our purpose, in previous kind of eras of our life or whatever. So for me, I grew up with trauma and abuse. My dad was an alcoholic and those kind of things. And then when I graduated high school, I was like, yay, that's all done. That's gone. I never ever have to think about that again. And I actually started a business, a nonprofit in my late 20s. And through that, starting that and running that for 5 years, it brought up a lot of old things that I thought were very much dealt with and gone. As those were coming up, I learned, that I needed to heal. I learned that my past was affecting me, even though I didn't want it to be, and even though I thought it was in the past. And then, so my attitude is kind of just like, okay, let's get everything done as fast as possible. Let's like power through this and get it over with. And so I tried to do that on myself. And what I found was I started going to therapy and reading books and doing programs and like, okay, I'm going to kind of fix myself. And what I found was a lot of people saying, well, you're this way and you do this because of that. And you're anxious because of that. And you burned out because of that. And I was like, well, that's great, but I actually want to be different. And I wasn't finding a lot of things that were actually helping me change my behavior and change how I was feeling inside. So that's what led me to the work that I do now is hypnotherapy. I became a clinical hypnotherapist and a rapid transformational therapist. Someone introduced me to someone doing that. She's now a colleague, but a friend of a friend. And I had a session and I experienced this powerful, it was really a transformation. Like it really helped me actually change behaviors instead of just like knowing what was wrong, actually
Mhm.
behaving differently, which was really powerful for me. That was a time when my kids were older and I was looking at going back to school, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I've been, looking for, is instead of just kind of diagnosing something, and imagine if you go to like a surgeon and you need knee surgery, if they were just like, well, let's talk about how you got hurt over and over and over, right? It's a little bit sometimes what it feels like can happen. And what I felt like was happening to me with therapies, we were talking about like the problem and how I got hurt, but not like, let's just do the surgery so you can walk again. And so that's really what I'm passionate about again, and helping business owners if there are any areas where they need to actually change behaviors and show up differently and think differently, to just do the work so you can kind of get on with your life and your business and the thing you're here to do.
I think that's so important too, because my best friend and I have conversations about this all the time because we're both, come from different versions of trauma. And
Yeah.
we have TikTok therapy is basically what we've called. We've ended up on TikTok therapy, but it's opened our eyes to some different things like ADHD and neurodivergency and all these different things. And we're just like, it's almost overwhelming. Sometimes we were just talking about this the other day. Like, it's like, cool. Like all these things are like wrong with us. but I'm like, do I need to, can I just get some Adderall or something? Like what's, you know, or like, and we know because we're also both very self-aware and self-reflective.
Yes.
And my other best friend is like this too. She's just not a TikTok junkie like we are,
Yeah.
but it's like the therapy. And sometimes you end up with a therapist that's also, which by the way, you can shop around for therapists. If you're listening to this, you don't have to pick the first one that you go to, just like a relationship.
Yeah. I like that conversation. I think that's an important conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a good fit for you and there's not a good fit for you. And therapists, just like any other kind of friendship relationship, doesn't matter what it is. And I've had a couple where it's like they're really good at validating my feelings about stuff, but then I'm like, all right, but I mean, like sometimes I'm the problem. I don't really want to like, I mean, I'm perfect, but you know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah,
it's cool, but like I'm like, I'm not actually making any progress or like figuring out where my issues are, what my triggers are, and how to identify when it's a trigger and when it's just like somebody's just being an asshole. Like, how do I, right? So I like that, like taking some action, fixing the problem, or like working on your issues and being able to like actually be productive and move forward. Cause that's sometimes it just feels like, okay, cool. Now I know what's wrong with me. I have all these different,
and that's
but I'd like to make some progress. Like this is exhausting.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm a little unique as a clinical hypnotherapist and a transformational coach, because we get homework and we, I share techniques and tools to actually change the behavior. And I don't want to sound like I'm against therapy, but there's a place for it, right?
Yeah.
There's a place to understand like, oh my goodness, this is why this happens. And this is why I'm like this, and that kind of thing. But then the next step, right? The logical next step is to change it and to be able to see what it's like and change those patterns of behavior and really heal to begin to live your life without it. Not that you'll never have ADHD, right? But some of the triggers that people have, they're like, well, I can't do this because I'm triggered by that. And I can't do that because I'm triggered by that. And it's because there's not an understanding that you can actually change that. You actually don't have to be triggered by those things. You can become empowered so that they don't bother you. The thing that happened that made you triggered is important. It's important to know. It's important to honor. But you can have a different way of behaving where those things don't bother you and you're empowered. And that's really important.
Yeah,
I think TikTok is amazing. Tons of people are getting educated.
Oh my God, it's been insane. I try to, I'm like one of those, like, when you get like a new diet or you start a new workout routine, you're like, you guys, seriously, if you only eat lettuce from like 12 to 6 p.m. or whatever, I'm like a little disciple of TikTok. I'm like, seriously though, but like, I've learned a lot about ADHD. I've learned a ton about like the LGBTQIA plus community. Like there's so many different and neurodivergency too, which is like, there's so many, I'm like, I don't even know what this means. Like how, what? And so I'll like start Googling things. I'm like, oh, this is really fascinating. And just like hearing perspectives and stuff. So it's helped me from that. And then also just like identifying some of these things in myself where I'm like, holy shit, this whole time I thought I was just defective. Turns out like there's a whole bunch of other people out here like me.
Well, it's so exciting because there's so much brain science now. So if you think about it, I've been able to, I think it's really fascinating. This I totally nerd out on, but we've been able to measure, for instance, for the military, they were able to understand how bombs affected your bones and your heart and your organs and all of these things. But until very recently, they weren't able to know how they were affecting your brain because we didn't have the measurements. We didn't have the tools. And so now we have the tools, and it's really new. It's fairly new that we're learning how our brains work and how we think and how these things affect us, and how there's people who think the neurodivergence, like they think completely differently.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting to know that, because what they're also learning is that we can change easier than people thought, that we have neuroplasticity and our brains can change. And that's really, really hopeful. And that's, again, what I'm passionate about, is because the same thing that's helping us understand all the different ways we think and operate and how we're all traumatized. There's like, everybody's traumatized.
Yeah.
Like,
we're all messed up. It's fine.
The same token, we're understanding that like we can actually change behaviors. We can actually feel better. There are people healing even from PTSD. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. It's like we started it, the identifying what the thing is. And so like, I feel like just being able to say it's PTSD or it's PTSD, which is a whole different thing.
For people.
Yeah. Or adult ADHD, which is severely undiagnosed in women or underdiagnosed. women in particular, we're all just out here running around stressed the fuck out. Like
we're thinking we're ditzy.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And we've like had to create all these crazy systems just to keep our brains like from losing their minds. Yeah. And then now it's like, okay, but now what's next? Like we have to do something with all this information. So I feel like it's kind of a cool time to be alive, as they say. Cause yeah, there's just like, I'm a millennial. And so we started the whole Ritalin, that was like everyone had ADD like as kids and stuff, but then somehow it's the like the former talented and gifted children who are like precocious in certain ways and then become like overachievers. Anyway, I could talk about this for days.
I love it. I'm good.
Yeah, it's okay. Good. I was like, sometimes I like go like half of what I love so much about this podcast is that I learn so many things and just have these crazy cool conversations with people. And it's like almost like mini therapy for me. Sometimes I'm like, sorry guys, you had to listen to this.
And I think there's just a lot of people in the same situation. I think there's a ton of people that are on TikTok going, okay, I want to figure it out. Like you said, like, am I broken? Do I just need to cope with this? Do I just need to is this a forever diagnosis, or like, can you change? And yes, you can. It doesn't mean, if you have ADHD, you're not necessarily going to be a spaz. It's also embracing like that can be a superpower. It can be a good thing. And even, I know it sounds crazy, but even with trauma, a lot of times it makes people really sensitive and they'd say, well, I'm empathetic. Well, that may just been a response that you had to be really aware of the situation so you could stay safe. But it's fantastic in your business, when you can incorporate that about yourself and understand that you can be empowered over your triggers or empowered over people, not over them, but with people, right? That you don't have to be avoiding situations, but you can use that as a superpower and understand yourself.
My best friend and I, we talk about, I'm like, basically, so again, TikTok has informed me that my entire personality is from trauma. So I'm like, oh, I'm super strategic because control is my favorite coping mechanism. So that means that if I can be like, this is the way things need to go, it's like how my brain just organizes things. Cause I'm like, then I feel like I have control over what's happening. Even if I don't, if I have a plan, if I have a contingency.
They've done studies that entrepreneurs actually usually score higher in like trauma or bipolar or depressive or manic, or different things like that. Again, it's this magical thing, right? That drives us. And that's good, but we have to learn what to do when it's no longer serving us, right? Like for me, in the past business that I did where I completely burned myself out, like I had this huge drive and I started a whole company, but a lot of it was to prove myself, to prove that I was valuable, right? Same. And so then now I learned and I grew, and that was like an amazing experience in hindsight. And now it's like, okay, I still have that drive, but it's healthy. It's coming from a different place of, of more service than trying to kill myself to prove I'm valuable. Now I know I'm valuable and I can bring that into that space.
Yeah. It's like the evolution into healthy boundaries for your own self, like boundaries that you give and maintain for yourself too. But yeah, that's definitely, I quit corporate life and I was like, it's dumb. Like they're so wrong. And I was like, no, I mean, like, it's just not a good fit, right? It's the same. It's like leaving a relationship. It's like, they're not necessarily a bad person. They're just maybe not the right person for you. And I was like, I did the same. I was like, I'm going to go show these people. But yeah.
And what I just adore about business owners is there's a level of courage that it takes to change and to grow and to be different. And I think it's the same level of courage that it takes to start a business and do something, on your own, or do something different, or follow your passion. And I find, entrepreneurs just inspiring in that way. Like, we're going to do stuff. We're going to make a mess and we're going to be a little bit crazy and we're going to do stuff. And I just love that.
Hey, thanks for listening so far. Just wanted to stop and tell you about Monday.com, which is one of my favorite task and project management systems to use. If you've been looking for a way to better coordinate your tasks and project management with your team members or with clients and customers, Monday.com is a great way to do that. You can set up individual boards for each client. You can share and collaborate across multiple boards with your team members, upload files and contracts and information that you want to keep handy, all kinds of stuff. So it's a great way to manage a lot of moving pieces and a lot of tasks across multiple different resources. The link for that is mondaycom.grsm.io/catalyst. And of course, the link will be in the show notes too if you want to check it out later. Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite things. Is like, it's never, because I hate I love and hate, I guess, the term like fail forward or learn from your failures, learn from your mistakes. And like, I don't feel like that's the term for what's happening. It's like, it's basically like scientific methods. You know what I mean? Like we have a hypothesis, we try it, it does or doesn't work. And then we like move on to the next iteration. So I feel like it's more of that kind of a process instead of the terminology too of like fail, learn from your mistakes. I feel like that that was like a live realization that just happened as far as like the scientific method thing. Cause I'm like, it's not failing. Like you can't.
Right. Like, and it's right. It's just the heaviness of the word. Like if I was going to bake a cake, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, I failed. I would just be like, oh, I found the best recipe. But we don't put the pressure on like baking a cake, but we put pressure on ourselves in our business. Like if we, if we do one iteration of something, there's a ton of pressure, like this needs to work. And like you're saying, the difference there is your idea. Like, is it okay if we just experiment here? Is it okay if we just like try some different things and see what works and see what doesn't? That's a powerful way to view everything because there's a lot of failing involved. And it's like when they talk about, baseball players and they strike out and they don't go, I'm a failure. They just go, all right, what do I need to tweak about my swing?
Yeah. And like no one has 100% success rate at a bat. Like you can't.
Right. We do put a ton of pressure on ourselves to be 100% in our business. Like we have a workshop and we're like, we have to have it look this way and that way. And
I do that to myself all the time. And like, theoretically, I know better, right? I'm like, oh, it's fine. Like you're going to learn as you grow. But some of those things too, especially when you're trying something really big and new, it feels like a really big failure. I was just talking about this. I had another podcast interview this morning. You guys scheduled on the same day, which is nice sometimes. But yeah, we were talking about, she's like, I did my launch for my workshop and no one showed up and I have no idea why. She's like, launches are terrible, but I'll tell you what, I learned a bunch of other stuff. Like we got super dialed in on the processes. We gained some efficiencies. A whole bunch of like ebooks came out of that. So she's like, no one showed up to the workshop, but I still accomplished a bunch of other things as a result of doing the workshop. And I was like, that's good. That makes sense. That's like it's like quantifiable, like, okay, maybe this didn't happen, but all of these things did to help me grow my business or move it forward. So.
And one thing I have a group coaching Kick-Ass Life and we set goals and we've been talking about, and Mel Robbins talks about this too, is the idea of what's the process? Can you focus on the process versus the outcome? Like the person that you were talking to, she had the workshop. There was a huge process she learned and a lot of good that came out of that, even though the outcome, 0 people. If we only focus on the outcome of 0 people and we ditch all the learning that could have happened in the middle, to me, if we're going to use the word failure, that's probably the closest thing to it. Instead of being like, okay, what was the process that I just got better at? What is the process I just learned? What is the process I can tweak? And I think that's the way I talk about it with people is we have where we are and our goal, and in the middle is a gap. And it's like our whole job is to mind the gap. And the way you're talking about viewing failure is really resiliency, right? Is really a powerful mindset shift in thinking about it. It helps us with that between where I am and where I want to go. That's all our mindset. That's where we need to do the most work, I think, is entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Cause it's the like resiliency, the ability to pick yourself up over and over and over again. And it like, there's definitely like, I can't even tell you, like I started my business 6 months before COVID, and there's a lot of people that like I had started networking and stuff like that. There are a lot of people with me that had started whatever their business was or gone out on their own in some way, shape or form, like right before COVID. And we were all like, well, shit. Okay. So it was a rough, like at least a year, probably closer to a year and a half. Like I felt like I was just forever trying to do new things. Like it was like a never ending pivot, just a circle, I guess.
Ah,
um, maybe spiral, maybe like, like those little spirographs. Did you,
yep,
talk
yep.
about? Yeah. Where it's like just overlapping circles over and over again. Cause it was just like constantly having to change and evolve and adapt my strategy. And then I would also learn things where I'm like, okay, I don't like doing these pieces. So next iteration or whatever. It was real exhausting there for a little while. I was like, at some point, like, do I ever just like have a business? Like, instead of having to constantly change. And I've looked at jobs every now and again. I'm like, maybe I'll just get a real job again. Like, but then I'm like, dude, I'd be a nightmare employee at this point. Like if I can't come in
Yes.
sometime between 8 and 10:30 and also drink a beer at lunch, sometimes like I'm not interested.
Right. The
So
idea we're unemployable, 100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, basically. But there's definitely been times like that where it's just like it just gets really hard sometimes. That's fine. But like it's part of the process.
Part of the process. I think it's really powerful that you're talking about it, because I think a lot of times what happens is like, I'm just going to keep using this example. And I started my business 4 years ago, and I had workshops where like, my mom showed up, and like this mom figure who was, before I started my business, I had worked for her. And so she would be like the only one showing up. Her name was
Yeah.
Joan. And like my
Shout out to
diehard
Joan.
fan,
Yeah.
right? So I would do the whole workshop for Joan, and I think that's just part of the process. So now, almost 4 years later, I have a workshop. It'll go really well, but we don't talk about always the one that nobody came to, or the one with,
Mhm.
one person or a mom or whatever, sister. And I think it's really important. It's important to have these conversations and normalize it, because that hopefully can normalize this. What's more important, right, is the process and what you're learning, and trusting yourself, and continuing to get up. And for me, when you're really struggling with that and you're not able to be resilient and keep getting up, like getting help, finding support for that.
I talk about that a lot too with a tribe community of other people who are doing what you're doing. Like get into some groups with like small business
Yes.
owners, entrepreneurs, because they can relate to you in a way that no one else can. And they will hype you up so hard. Like I tell people that all the time. I'm like, it's a completely different feeling. Like when you're in a networking meeting and they're like, say something that you're celebrating right now or something that you're excited about. And you're like, I just bought another LLC. And they're like, yay. Like no one's like, why though?
Right. Do you need that?
Why?
Do you
Yeah,
need
it
another
seems,
else?
aren't you like kind of busy? And I'm like, yeah, also I'm starting a nonprofit at the same time. Remember that whole
That's
ADHD thing?
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you can call me. I'll help you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Please God. Someone needs to control this nonsense. Yeah. That's kind of the thing. I'm like, it's a whole different vibe. No one's like, oh, that seems hard though. They're like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, what can I do to help you? Like, what resources do you need? Who do you need to meet? Like that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
you don't have to do it alone by all means. Anyway, oh my God. Yeah. I feel like we could talk for like 1,000 years.
Well, and I think the people who are successful get help. That was
Yeah.
so exciting. I was at an event and in November, and Mel Robbins was there over on Zoom, but she
Oh,
talked
nice.
about like going to therapy and EMDR and like psychedelics. And like, I think I'm so excited because people are normalizing all this stuff, right? We're
Mhm.
learning, oh, there's a thing called trauma, and I guess it affects your brain. And I guess I had some, which is great.
Yeah.
And then we're like experimenting with all these different ways to heal and grow. And for me, the one I love the most is, hypnotherapy and connecting with your subconscious, but there's so many. It is really exciting. It's an exciting time.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, you kind of mentioned this earlier, as far as the science and stuff goes, like, how does the process work? Like when you're doing like hypnotherapy with somebody, how does it go?
So the main thing is connecting with our subconscious. So we have our conscious and we have our subconscious. And the conscious is 5% of your life, and the subconscious is 95%. So like
Cool.
most of the
Cool, cool,
thoughts
cool.
we
Yeah.
think today, we thought yesterday, and we have these patterns of behavior and patterns of thought. And most of it is great. But if there is something that isn't serving us, it's located in that subconscious. The problem is most of us try to fix it with the conscious. So it's
Yeah.
5 to 95. And scientists say your subconscious is a million times, some say like 30,000 times stronger than your conscious.
Uh-huh.
So it makes sense to operate with that part, right? That's the main science behind it. Is if you're going to change behaviors, it's way easier if you work with your mind, with your subconscious in the space where the patterns are, instead of fighting them with your conscious. And your conscious is like, when you're like, well, I need to do that differently, or I should do this, or I know better, or, you kind of have an intention, or you're saying your affirmations or whatever. And if you're not connecting with your subconscious, it's kind of like, screw you. This pattern's been here a long time. We're going to protect it. It's not going anywhere. So the ways that we connect with our subconscious, it's called an alpha brainwave. So our normal conscious state is beta brainwave. So now they can measure it, and it's actually a different thought process, a different pattern of how our brains are working. So if you can get an alpha and theta, you can have powerful changes happening quickly. So a few different ways that you get there are, and we operate this way normally. So a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to be hypnotized, or that's weird. Well, we already operate in that alpha theta brainwave state all the time. When we wake up in the morning, when we go to sleep at night, when we're driving and we zone out, when we're watching a movie, and it's where kids grow up. So the other thing that's important to know, and it's if you've ever done meditation and deep relaxation or hypnosis. So the important thing to know is kids live there till they're 7. And so we're getting all these programs. And so that's really powerful when we're thinking of, like, you were learning about past trauma, right? It still affects you. Well, it affects you because you were learning how the world works. When you were little, we're learning, are we safe? How does money work? How does business work?
Yeah.
How do women work? What do they do? And what don't they do? And men, and like all of these things, you're just learning. Like, kids are just little sponges and they're learning. And so those patterns operate through for the rest of our life. Anything that's set operates the rest of our life. And it's great unless it's not serving you. For me, one of the programs I got when I was little is men make money and women don't. When my mom was a single mom and she was really poor. So before she divorced my dad, we had money because there was a man and he had money. And when they divorced, she had no money. And if she dated a guy with money, we had money. And if not, we didn't. And she never talked about this. It was never like spoken out loud, but I downloaded men make money and women don't. I mean, it was the 80s. It was legit a thing. And so I go to raise my prices the first, year into my business, and I can't raise them. Like, I can't, I'm like, people, I'll have them, set down or in my head, and people will be like, oh, I don't know. And I'll be like, I'll cut it in half, like instantly, on the phone.
50% just for you.
You doubted me for half a second.
Yeah.
Price is lowered, or offering things free to friends and family when I knew, I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so I got, to the root of that and uncovered this. And then I'm like, okay, that's not true. That's not helpful. Women can make money. It's funny because my mom makes money now, it's, and what you do is you change those programs, you update them, right? Just like in a computer, you have an old program, it's not serving you, you update it. And so once I updated that, it became a non-issue because it was old, and I replaced it with something that's true, that is just fine. And so that's the process of connecting with your subconscious. And, sometimes you can do this process consciously, but if you're finding, like, I work with a lot of people who've been trying a lot of stuff over and over and over and over and not getting results. And so then, well, that's fine. You just need to work with the subconscious. The other place that it's really fascinating where you can change behaviors quickly is play. So your subconscious is imagination and it's emotion. And when you can play, like even your example of saying, well, what if we just experiment and practice? That takes a lot of the pressure off changing something. So that's a way to experiment with changing behaviors too. And then repetition. Repetition is a way to change behaviors. But to me, it's a little inefficient. Like, I'd rather just go to the subconscious and change it faster too. But it's still a good way to change them.
Yeah, I think I was writing down notes. I was like, this is what I was thinking while you were talking. This is where my personal therapy comes in, the learnings. But yeah, when you're talking about like the subconscious, like your programming and stuff like that, that's something that I've started working on, I guess in the last like couple of years or so. Cause I was like, what's the relationship pattern? Like I'm doing the same thing over and over again, picking people that aren't good for me. And it doesn't mean that they're pieces of shit either. Like that's just, I keep picking people who aren't compatible with me really, like for what I actually want, and ignoring red flags and all the things. Right.
Yep.
And so I met with someone and we did like a couple like inner child exercises, and I was like, oh man.
So you were connecting with your subconscious because you were using your imagination and you were visualizing. And the other thing that's really fascinating about your mind is there's no time. So when you visualize that, that younger you were updating that program kind of in real time, because there's just no time. Like what happened when we were young runs now, but then when we go and shift it, a new program runs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense too, because it's like it takes practice, like you said. So being aware of it and like how it translates in the story that I keep trying to put myself into, which that's like for a wine Zoom.
Well, but just for
down.
you to know, just like we can visualizing
Mm-hmm.
and imagination connects with the subconscious, and you visualize changing that scenario, telling your younger self what they needed to hear, and saying, we're not 7 anymore, we're not 5 anymore. You get to have this new life. You get to do things differently. You can also, what's really powerful, so that heals the past. What's really powerful is to envision the future. Like what is you in a healthy relationship look like?
Mm-hmm.
And when you can connect with the visualization of that, you're connecting with that alpha theta brainwave, that 95%, and seeing like, okay, what would that look like? And paying attention to couples that you like or admire,
Yeah.
either in your life or on TV or whatever. Like say,
Yeah.
well, I would like this and I would like that. And then like imagine it and kind of pretend with it. If that makes sense, then you're
Mm-hmm.
connecting with your subconscious and you can change things.
Hey, thanks for listening so far. I just wanted to stop and share one of my go-to CRM resources, which stands for Client Relationship Manager or Customer. Less Annoying CRM, I think their name was intentionally chosen, it has been my favorite that I've been using for a while. There's lots of other great CRMs out there. I have some other ones that I refer to, but it's the one that I'm using and I like the most just because it allows for different customization options and a little bit more flexibility. It's a little bit more manual and doesn't have automated pipelines necessarily, but that's one of the things I actually like about it. So depending on what you're looking for in your CRM, Less Annoying CRM is a great one to try. If you use my link to sign up for Less Annoying CRM, you get an entire month for free on top of their already free 1-month trial. So you get 2 months for free if you use my link. I think that's plenty of time to test something out and see if it's going to work for you. They have great tutorials and guides to get you through setting up your account as well. And their customer support has always been helpful when I've needed to ask questions. The link for that is bit.ly/catalyst LACRM. And that link will also be in the show notes. I think it was really just because it's like bringing it out and being aware of it and like, okay, so that's what's
bringing
happening.
It up to your conscious.
Yeah, it's like, okie dokie. So let's be intentional about what's happening. And one of the things that she said that really stuck out with me is she's like, you always know, like my instincts are 100% accurate. And that was the thing that I said to you. I was like, so dumb. Like I know every time, especially when I'm out of the relationship or whatever, I'm like, why did you?
Because when we're little, we learn that we don't have a voice, that we can't make those decisions, right?
So and she's like, your 7-year-old is trying to tell you every time. She's like, bro, why do you keep doing this to yourself? Like, I keep trying to tell you and you keep ignoring me. And I was like, okay, that really sinks in because it's like I'm letting myself down over and over again. I was like, oh my God. But it's it's the course, I feel like, of conversations and working with people like you that like I pick up something from everybody and I'm like, oh, that really like that clicked in a way that like nothing else had clicked before. Cause it's like, I knew, again, consciously, like I know that I'm repeating the same pattern. I keep putting myself in these situations and I keep making myself miserable essentially, but it's like, I'm like, how do I get out of this loop? So yeah, it's fascinating. Our brains are
they're fascinating. And they're always, the main thing is to trust yourself. And that's the work to say, I do know. I am like, I need to listen to this. I need to listen to this, your intuition and the part of you that's like, that's not good. Instead of being like, well, he's nice, or whatever we do. Like,
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never said that.
We're like a client, like our intuition is like, don't work that client. We're like, well, I need the money,
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Seriously. And like when you're talking about like helping friends and family for free or whatever, or cheap, don't do it. Yeah, but those are all lessons that we get to learn. What do you think are the top 3 things that all business owners need to know about what you do?
I think the main thing that I'm really passionate about is that you can change, right? And that's something that now they're studying our brains and they're studying neuroplasticity and they're finding that we can rewire things in a shorter amount of time than what was once thought. You're not broken, you're not doomed. Even if you've been banging yourself head against the wall, for a little bit, things can change. You just need to reach out and ask for help or find the right resources. You can succeed and you can change, you can reprogram these things. I think that's obviously, what I'm really passionate about. And then it doesn't have to take forever. I know for me, as I was going, starting out this journey, and people were just telling me, well, this is why you do this, and just repeat this to yourself for, a million years, and then you'll change. I got discouraged. I'm like, okay, so do I get better when I'm like 80? Is this the plan? Like, because that sucks. So the other thing is to know, like, it can happen quickly. And that doesn't mean like magic pills or silver bullets or anything, but we can benefit from the work that we're doing, and we can, find results, and it doesn't have to take years and years. And then the last thing for me, like about the work that I do, is I'm very much like a teacher. And if someone works with me, they usually work with me 6 months. And my goal is to like give you the homework and the worksheets and the processes so that you can do this. These are skills, and they are teaching them on TikTok. I do think we do need guides for some things at some points when it's just too overwhelming. But these are skills we can learn. We can learn how to, regulate our nervous systems. We can learn how to process emotions. We can learn how to trust our intuition. I'm very much like a teacher. Like my goal is you are like, cool, I'm done. Bye, Cyrina.
Yeah.
And you know how to do some
teach
stuff.
the person to fish, as they say.
Because you got stuff to do. You got into business not to be in therapy for 5 years. You got into business to like do your thing.
I think like just life in general too. It's like, dude, I want to be in therapy for like till I'm 80. Like basically,
right. You want a good relationship. Yeah. That's the goal.
Yeah. Or really, honestly, like I feel like I've evolved to the point where that's not the thing anymore. Like I'm okay with where I'm at. And like I was telling my friend this too. I was like, when I imagine my future right now, like if you're like, what do you want to be doing in 5 years or 10 years? There's not a person in the picture. It's just me doing my thing, living my life, like killing it, right? Building my empire, helping women and girls do whatever they want to do. Anyway.
I have a colleague, and we joke like that the main thing that we do, our main job, is to help people know they don't need us. Like, that you're good.
Yeah, because I'm the same. There's a lot of like consulting formulae, whatever, plural formula out there where you can like learn how to teach this particular thing. But their whole thing is like getting you into a corporate business or a larger small business for the long term. And I'm like, I don't want that. One, I get bored. Again, ADHD, overachiever. Let's like get some shit done and move on.
I would say that's probably part of my personality in life too, where I'm like, who the heck wants to do this forever?
Yeah. I mean, it's like in theory, like I think the part that's dangerous about it, and can probably be dangerous about some therapists or mental health professionals in some ways, that's probably the business model that they've been taught or learned, is that like you want people for the long term, because like sometimes it can be good. And I'm not saying it's not good to have therapy for a long time, but when it's like, we're going to try and like keep the relationship going. I'm the same way. Like none of my projects are longer than 6 months, and they're usually 3 to 4 months for the most part. It's like, let's do some things. Sometimes we start a new project when that one's over, but it's like, there's an end and a new one. Cause I can't do it.
And I'm very adamant, like to always have like a coach or a support or a mastermind or something. It just doesn't, it doesn't always have to be the same person. Because I do, like you were saying, like get it yourself in a community. I'm not saying do this alone. You can work with someone who's like, we're going to work from point A to point B and have some goals and get there.
So when people are looking for someone like you, like consultant, coach, mindset professional, therapist, etc., what do you think? I feel like that's part of the problem too, is like a lot of what we do too, there's a lot of like saturation and people who say that they're a thing. You obviously have some licensing certifications, etc., behind yours, but what should people be looking for when they're trying to find somebody to help them with some sort of like mindset or mental health type things?
So my first thing is find somebody that you trust. And you already said it, like, it's okay to shop around. It's okay to like look for three or four and like call them and just be really clear. Like, I'm not making a decision today. If they try to hard sell you and say, you're not really vested if you don't buy, probably don't work with that person. And I don't want to knock anybody's like sales processes, but give yourself time and space to make the decision. Go with somebody that you trust. I have a couple past clients that people can call. Like, I think that's fair to see how that went, or for sure look at their testimonials, or, ask a lot of questions. Just make it so that you feel comfortable with the situation, but mostly trust yourself. Because a lot of times if people get into a bad situation, they know, it didn't feel right at the beginning, because we're all in different circumstances. Like, Like you mentioned the LGBTQIA community. Sometimes if someone doesn't understand that or doesn't work with that, or if you have trauma, find someone who's trauma informed. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you can get into a situation where someone's kind of pushing you or making you feel guilty for something that just needs to be healed or looked at
Hmm.
differently. So really trust yourself and know that it's totally fine to be picky, totally fine to, look for a few different people.
I honestly feel like too, this just popped into my head that if you struggle with that kind of thing, like if you have a hard time advocating for yourself, because a lot of times that's kind of related, have a buddy go with you and just be like, will you come? Just like you would have somebody go to the car salesman with you, if you struggle with negotiating or being able to say no or people pushing you into things that you don't want to do. And that's essentially why you're going to therapy. Like that's the wrong kind of therapist for you. But like take somebody with you or just have somebody that like you're going to check in with afterwards and just be like, hey, this felt weird. And then you're like, well,
Yep.
don't work with that person. And like sometimes I know for me, like sometimes I just need somebody to tell me that I'm not wrong. Like I just need a little bit
Yeah.
of validation from time to time and be like,
Right.
no, you're not crazy. Like that was not cool.
And that's what I would encourage people. If it just feels funny and you don't even know why, or something felt uncomfortable, just go with that.
I actually just saw something the other day too that was like the different kinds of therapy and or the methods. I think
Yep.
so. There's like the CBT, like cognitive behavior, and then like
Yep.
different. And I was like, I didn't realize that there were that many different types, but it was like specifically like if you struggle with these things, this type of therapy is not good for you because you're going to feel like you're being gaslit. And
Yeah.
if you have problems with surviving narcissistic relationships or like that, it's not going to feel good. It's not going to be healthy, and you need a complete. And
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit! Like I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Mental health conversations important, I think.
Yeah, I think that it is. And, I think I probably I'm definitely aware of different therapies that are out there. And it really, I think it's helpful to know somebody's trauma informed. If there is a possibility of like reading their testimonials or, talking to somebody else, getting a referral, really like who do you know
Yeah.
who had a really good experience with somebody else? I would highly recommend that. I know sometimes that's hard to have the conversation like, hey, I'm looking for a therapist. But, if you have a few trusted friends, you could ask. I think that's really the best way to go. And then if you get into it and you're finding like, oh my gosh, I go to therapy and I feel like a piece of garbage, quit.
Yeah.
Like
Don't do
quit.
it. Yep.
That's not the goal. You are not supposed to feel
You're not
bad
supposed to
or
feel
like you're not
worse.
trying hard enough. And again, if you're working at it consciously, that 5 to 95, you can see how that could easily feel like gaslighting or feeling guilty or feeling not like you're not working hard enough. If you're working
Mhm.
consciously and the problem is subconscious, you can just kind of know that just from this conversation too, like, oh, maybe this is a subconscious thing and that's why it's not working instead of me not working hard enough or not trying hard enough, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to like try different things too and like work through the process. And like even like I was talking about the therapist that was like just validating everything that I said. Like I started just feeling kind of gross when I because I just like went and bitched about everybody that was mad at work. And I'm like, that's not like doesn't seem right.
Yeah, so
And
it
but
probably
I needed it a little bit too. Like I needed someone to validate me and be like, you're
yep.
not like these situations are not great. These people do kind of suck sometimes, or at least some of them do. So that almost helped me like get to the next point of being like,
Yep.
oh, okay, like now what do I work on? It wasn't great for like the long term. It wasn't helping me like grow necessarily, but it also helped me be like, oh, I'm not defective. This is just not the
Yes.
right environment for me to be in. And it helped me transition out of the corporate environment that I was in. It's just I'm not a good fit for because
Mhm.
I like to think my way is better than everyone's.
I think we have different coaches and different
Mhm.
therapists and different people for seasons. And,
Yeah.
you got so far and then you shift. I know people do that, even with me, like we work on something for a season and then they're ready for the next thing. And
Mhm.
if you understand that too, maybe take some guilt or shame out of quitting or changing. It's totally fine.
Because ultimately if you are working with the right kind of person, they're going to like understand and like let you transition out of that too and not try to
Yeah.
make you feel guilty or stay. This is a good one. I'm excited about this interview. I usually
I
feel this way about
love,
most of them, but
well, I love you just like diving in. It's really fun.
that's good. I like it's again I like this stuff. I'm a doer. I'm an action person, so I'm like let's just blow past all the boring things and let's talk about trauma. Those are like my favorite conversations. I want to meet someone new. I'm like, ooh, we're talking about, okay, all right, let's go. I'm ready for this.
For that, like there's a measure. I don't know if anybody's had the conversation with you. There's a adverse childhood experiences test, like an ACE test to kind
Oh,
of test your trauma. I just want to add, like, to this point that we can change, like, the higher it is, the more likely you're to have addiction. If it's over a 6, you're supposed to die 20 years earlier.
Holy
And,
crap.
all of these things. And like mine is a 7, mine's really high. And you can change that. Like, that doesn't have to be a statistic. We can really honor the experiences of trauma and also know that we can change them, and we don't have to have all of the negative effects from things, that we kind of should have, because we can change things. So
No, I like that. It's very important. Okay. Well, now this is a weird segue now, but what advice as a business owner yourself, what advice would you give fellow business owners when it comes to running their businesses?
well, for me, it's probably not going to segue very much, because one thing I really, really believe powerfully is, like, when we're running our business, like, a lot of times it'll run us into, we keep having the same problem over and over, or we keep getting triggered, or we keep, doing a behavior or a pattern that we don't like. And a lot of times business owners get discouraged, like, oh, that means it's not going to work, or that means I can't do this, or that means I'm not cut out for this. And I believe the reason it leads us right into those things is because we're ready to change those. So if you can change your mindset to believe, like, okay, if I'm running up against a problem over and over, it's because it's time to change it. And I'm ready, and I'm running into it because the goal is to get past it. And I think that's a powerful thing that I really believe about my business, is it's making me a better human. It's making me, it's leading me to my goals and my purpose and my vision. And each time I bump up against something, it's kind of an invitation to grow. It's not a sentence like, oh, see, you couldn't do it. You couldn't hack it. So
try harder.
Right.
Work more. Send more
that
emails.
Worked, oh my gosh.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah.
I said, I'm like a pit bull. Like, I'll just hold on to something till, like, I don't let go gracefully.
Oh, that's amazing. No, I think that's huge though, because I believe in the universe providing you with the opportunities to grow, and especially when you start like opening yourself up to those things. It's kind of like, a little bit of like law of attraction, affirmation kind of concept. That's happened to me a lot in real life too, just like business. And like when I'm like, okay, universe, I get it. This is a lesson I need to learn. This keeps happening to me. Right.
The universe is really kind. That's like not letting us forget. But the other thing is, if you think about a computer program, what's your goal and your vision and your desire, right? For a relationship, or for sales, or for going on vacation and having freedom, time freedom, and financial freedom. Those are new programs, right? Most likely those were not downloaded before age 7. So like the old program's running, and the whole purpose is to get the new program so that you can hold the success that the universe, wants to bring you. And so it's the middle of like the old one not working and then creating the new one. That's the mindset work.
Yeah. I like it. I like to defer with humor and self-deprecating jokes. So
perfect.
We're working on it, right? It is actually an effort to do sometimes. I'm like, nope, stop apologizing. So number one, and stop making fun of yourself. Cause I'm like, that's some programming shit too for women, right? Is it like apologizing for ourselves, making ourselves smaller, being like, sorry that I know more things than you. I'm going to apologize for that, which is dumb because I'm always right. But yeah. So anyway, how can people get in touch with you? How can people support you, find you on the internet, et cetera?
Yeah. So if you can spell my name, Cyrina Talbot, Cyrina Talbott, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. My website is CyrinaTalbot.com. And on my website, you can, set up a time to just talk, schedule a time to talk. But otherwise, Facebook and Instagram, I do lives, and I've got information, having these conversations about intuition and healing and growth and trusting yourself, that kind of stuff.
Perfect. And I will post all of this stuff in the show notes and on my social media posts and stuff too. So
yeah. And then I wanted an invite. I have an upcoming workshop, Kick Overwhelm to the Curb, where I'm talking about that, mastering your mindset and your emotions and trusting your intuition. So yeah.
That'd be awesome. Very cool. Well, yeah, thanks for coming. I could talk again, like philosophy, mental health, whatever, days, years. I could talk about it forever. Thanks for reaching out to me. And it's probably one of my favorite podcasts I've done so far. Don't tell anyone else.
Well, I think I'm very biased, but it's so important for business owners, like, to have these conversations. And I love how real and like open you are about it. It's amazing. So.
Oh, thanks. It's the trauma.
Yeah, I'm sure there's tons of people that are like, yep, I relate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah.
point of it is like, if we can just help at least 15 other people in our lives not have to live
Yes.
as hard of a life, then we've done our jobs. So perfect. Well, yeah, thanks for stopping by, and I will talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening today. This was a great episode, and I'm sure you will appreciate the tips and insights from today. If you want to connect further with our guests, you can find the contact information, social media links, etc., any of the freebies in the show notes from today's episode. Please show some love to our guests and like, follow, and subscribe their content if you connected with them. And also don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe Building Better Businesses with Catalyst Consulting. Also, if you drop a juicy review, that's always cool too.